Hey guys, welcome back to another 3D printing video. And in today's video, we've got a pretty small printer that can be really good for people that want to get into 3D printing. This might be a great one to start with. So in this video, we're gonna unbox it, set it up, and do some prints. All right, so let's get started. Alright, so let's take a closer look at this thing, the MakerPi M1. Now it comes in this box. It's not very large, you guys can see, and it's not very heavy either. It's only about 5 to 8 pounds, I guess, with all the packaging, so it is quite light. We got fragile stickers all around it. Interestingly enough, 2 straps, which usually only, larger printers have these. So let's go ahead and cut these off. Alright, so let's see what it looks like. So as we open it up, the first thing we see here is a quick start guide. And this is, I guess, a manual here, kind of how to operate the printer, and it shows what everything is and does. So the manual is not too high quality, but it is enough to understand and operate the machine. After sales card, a coil of white PLA filament, a micro SD to USB card adapter, a piece of PTFE tubing, a USB to micro USB cable, and this is how you're going to connect the printer to the computer if you wanted to use that option, a power adapter, and it is a 24 volt 2 amps. And here we have something interesting. Looks like a bag with some prints in it and a sticker with parameters. Let's see what we got here. Okay, so this is where our micro SD card is, and it is a 16 gig. Wow, that's quite large. And it also looks like we got some, I guess, test models. So I'm guessing these models were printed on this printer, and they are both on rafts. We'll check these out a little later in the video when we print our own and see how they compare. So we got white foam here. And in between all that foam, we can see the printer. And wow, this thing is pretty small. But yeah, you guys can see how well it's packed. It's very well protected with lots of foam around it. So that's everything that's in the box. Wow, I just can't believe how small this thing is. This might be the smallest printer that I've ever reviewed. Let me pull the foam out of there. So the part that's really impressive is how thin it is here on the side profile. It's not very deep, and you guys can see that the bed kind of sticks out past it. It's very unique. And just by holding it and feeling it, it's quite nice because everything is metal. Like you would think they'd cheap out on plastic, but literally everything's metal. All the casing's metal, the bed is metal, there's metal rods and things inside. And here we can see through the top. The top is completely open. And plus you can see all your components, which is kind of nice, and how it all works and operates. But yeah, pretty cool. Definitely a lot better built than I thought it was going to be. So here on the bottom we have a parameter sticker, some nice rubber feet. Well, I guess they're kind of maybe foam / rubber. And on the back here we got some controls. So this is where we're going to plug in the power, the USB connection to the computer, a USB port, looks like for Wi-Fi it says here, and then we got a little toggle switch between load, print, and unload. So every time you need to go through the different settings, you're going to have to switch it here. And then we got the micro SD card slot. So normally with any other 3D printers that you get, you have to kind of assemble things and put things together, which could be quite challenging. But here on this one, we don't really have to do much. The only thing we need to do is insert our PTFE tubing. And so that's gonna go between the extruder and the hot end assembly. I'm gonna go into the hot end first. I'm gonna push it down in there. You can see a little better from the front here. But yeah, we're just gonna go down into it. And it only goes down about 1/2 inch or so, so not very far. And then we'll take our other end and put it into the extruder coupler, and this one doesn't go down too far either. So yeah, pretty simple. So all you need to do is install this little tubing and we're pretty much good to go, which is really nice, especially if you don't want to mess around with installations and assembly and all that stuff. So for the next part, let's go ahead and plug in our power adapter. And so our plug will go here at the back of the printer. And so whenever we give it power, we can see here on the bottom a green light comes on. So let's go ahead and push this button and see what happens. It flashed real quickly red, so I'm guessing it's because there's no SD card in it. Now, before we insert an SD card here in the back, I think what we need to do is use the toggle here to load, because we do need to load our filament in, get it out of its bag. So it doesn't appear that this printer has any kind of spool holder anywhere on the side or that I can see. So I think you'd have to have an external one. But for this, we'll just put it down on the ground. So the extruder mechanism is plastic, but it feels like it's got really good tension. So I don't think there's going to be any issues there. And you do want to cut your filament on an angle before you feed it in there, so it's a lot easier to feed it. So we're just going to push it through there all the way till we get to the hot end. All right, I guess that's it. So I am on load on the back here. Let's flip it around. All right, so I switched it one more time and it looks like it activated it. So it's supposed to blink red like this when it's heating up. So now we're waiting, I think, for a green light, and that'll indicate that it's preheated. All right, so it's definitely preheating. We can see some filament coming out of there. I guess some of that blue test filament. Okay, there it goes. So now actually the extruder is on also. So it's pushing through the filament. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop it. I'm gonna go into the back and toggling it to the middle. And there we go. So unloading the filament would be the same way. You just toggle to unload, wait till it preheats, and then it'll pull it out. So let's go ahead and grab our SD card and insert it into the printer. And that's gonna be on this end over here. And it does go in right side up. All right, so we purged our filament, inserted the SD card, and our toggle switch in the back is in the middle, which says print. So now, if there is a test file on the card, it should be able to read it. So let's go ahead and click the button. It has to blink like this, showing you that it's, heating up and getting ready to print. But in any case, looks like it's preheating, and it does look like we have a test file in there, and I can hear the fan come on. I think it's the heat break fan. So initially here, the printer is not very loud. We'll see once it starts printing. All right, so we got some purge coming out. All right, so there it goes. And we can see we got green blink, meaning it's, I guess, in progress. All right, so it looks like our Z-axis is homing. And there it goes. And it appears, guys, that the offset from the nozzle to the bed is just right. So I'm gonna bring my microphone in so you guys can hear it a little better. You can definitely hear the stepper motors. But it's not loud, or at least super loud. It does have a sound to it, obviously, but I wouldn't say it's too obnoxious. All right, well, that's good news. So we are printing and everything looks good. One thing I'm a little confused about is that I don't see any kind of Z-axis switch or any kind of optical or sensor, unless it's hidden somewhere in the hot end here. But I'm kind of curious how it knows where, to stop off the axes. I guess we'll take a closer look after this print is done. So there are a few functions that you can do while it's printing by pushing this button. So if you just push it once, that should pause it. So let's see if that works. But it doesn't seem to react for some reason. In any case, it should pause when you click it once. And if you hold it down for a few seconds, it should cancel the print. Okay, I guess it did pause. So it does work, it just takes a little while for it to catch up. If we push it again, there it goes, it starts printing. So the pause works, you just have to wait a little bit till the buffer runs out and then it pauses. All right, so everything's looking good. I'm gonna let this print out and we'll take a closer look at it. All right, so our first print is finished and it looks like the same cat that we got as a sample. So the good part is that our bed is removable and it is magnetic. So taking off the model should be really easy and simple. So let's go ahead and try to flex it. And sure enough, pops right off. Well, that's cool. So yeah, I'm really liking the magnetic bed here. Even though it's small, we do get 100 millimeters squared in each direction, which is quite reasonable. All right, so the cat turned out pretty good, what I can tell. The layers are sitting really nice, and there's no shifts or offsets that I can see, so that's a good sign. A little bit of stringing between the ears, but not bad at all. So yeah, it looks great for the first print. Let's see how good this wrap comes off. Okay, so it just pops right off. And you can see, guys, it is hollow inside. So this is actually a pretty good test print. Let's compare it with this one that was included. The wrap broke off exactly the same way. So yeah, it actually appears to be exactly the same print from the same file. So to see a little better how the layers sit, you guys can see here on the blue. Now I'm noticing that this filament does have some discoloration, so it gives an illusion of a layering or something, but overall the layers are sitting beautifully and that's really good, because if it keeps printing like this, I think we got a really good printer here. For the next part, what we should do is go to the computer and we'll see what's on the SD card, maybe install the software and slice our own prints and see how that turns out. But before we do that, I wanted to show you guys that I actually figured out how the Z-axis end-stop switch works. It's actually inside this hot end mechanism. So as it touches the bed, it clicks the switch inside. You can see the whole thing moving. There's some springs here. So the whole hot end moves up and down. Well, that's pretty interesting. I haven't seen that kind of design. And it seemed to work great, at least on this first model we printed. But we'll see how well that works as we continue to use the printer. All right, guys, so here we are at the computer, and I got the micro SD card inserted, and this is what's on it. So we can see we got some G-code files, some EXE files for Cura, a little video here of how to use it, a PDF of the manual. So if you want to see a much nicer version, you can see it here. Now it looks like they have included the installation file for Windows, which is EXE, but I am using Mac, so I'm not going to be able to install that. But if we look here, we have a couple G codes, and if you notice, this G code here has a 0 and then .G code. And then over here we have a MOA.G code. What's happening here is this printer is only able to read the 0.G code. So when you slice a file, you have to name it or export it or rename it as 0.G code. And when you insert the SD card into the printer, this is what it's going to look for. So if you want to have multiple G codes in one file, or I guess one SD card, is you're going to have to just name them wherever they are and then rename them to the ones you want to print. You might be better off just plugging it straight to your computer and just sending files over like that. So I did want to mention that. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my Ender 3 profile, and here I am in the machine settings, and all I am doing is changing the build plate to 100 by 100 by 100 high and turning off the heated bed, and the rest is the same. So I'm just going to try that. Now there's probably a profile out there that you can use for this printer, but it should work with this also, and you guys can see how small that is compared to the Ender 3 platform. In any case, so let's go ahead and drag a calibration cube in here. So if we go over here, we can see all my parameters. So these are just the normal Ender 3 parameters. And I have people constantly asking me what my settings are, and honestly, they are pretty much standard settings here. The only biggest difference that I do is I just make the wall count 3 instead of 2, and then the top layer 6 and the bottom 5. So nothing really too much after that, and you just got normal stuff, normal temperatures, and the speeds at 50. Retraction, you know, goes up and down depending on how the prints turn out, and everything else is pretty standard, I would think. And I just do skirt with 3 lines around on most models. So if you haven't used Cura, it's pretty simple. You just highlight the model, and here you can move it around, scale it, rotate it, mirror it. So there's a lot of great videos out there if you want to learn how to use Cura. So yeah, once you get all your parameters set there, all you're going to do is click slice, and it's going to generate a preview here. If we click on it, we can see how it's going to print in each layer. So what we're going to do now is we're going to save this file. And so what you want to do is just save it to your computer or where you're slicing it. That way you can rename the file. And so we're just simply going to call it 0. And the reason you want to do this is because this is the only thing the printer knows what to look for. So if we click save, it's going to generate the G code. Then we're going to take this G code and put it on our micro SD card and insert it into the printer. So yeah, as simple as that. That's how you would make a file for this printer. Now you might be better off just to connect the printer to the computer. That way you can just send it straight there without, you know, having to mess with the SD cards and stuff like that. All right, so now that we got our file sliced, let's go ahead and change the filament out. I want to use a silk black, that way we can see a lot better of how the layers sit. So I'm going to go to the back and toggle the lever to unload, and that's going to preheat the nozzle and then push the filament out. So you are going to need to have some kind of external spool holder. I just got these simple little bearings here, so these are just skateboard bearings, and then I printed out these holders here from Thingiverse, and so the spool just sits on them like that. And it rolls really easy because of the bearings. So now, because it's a smaller printer, you know, you could use the smaller rolls, and they do have a little cutout here that I think you can insert something to be kind of like a spool holder, and then you can hang the roll here. So if you wanted to do that, that could work out pretty good too. All right, so there it goes. So now I actually put the lever the wrong way. I put it into load. We need unload, so I'm just gonna pull it out myself here. So since it's loading, I'm gonna go ahead and stick the new filament in, and now we should be able to be purging. All right, there it goes. You can see the black coming out. So I'm toggled to the middle. I should be able to just press this button, and it's going to read that 0.G code, which is our calibration cube. And there it goes. So this indicates that it's found the file and that it's heating up. Now the only thing that kind of worries me a bit is that because it preheats first, and then when it comes down to take its z-axis reading, it pushes into the build material, which is a little soft, and because the nozzle is hot, it seems like eventually it'll go deeper and deeper into the build plate, but I guess we'll see how that works. Alright, so it looks like it's ready to print. So yeah, it just pokes at the bed, and there it goes. Looks like we're good to go. So since this is only a skirt, it's going to print straight to the build platform. And the level seems to be perfect, so pretty interesting. So I'm just going to let this thing print out, and it should only take about 39 minutes, it said. So that's about the usual for every printer. And by the way, we are printing in 0.16 layer height with 50 millimeters a second for the speed. Alright, so I printed a calibration cube and also a benchy. So let's look at the cube first. And to my surprise, the print looks really good. So there's practically no ghosting at all. If there is any, it's very minor. And the vibrations are very low and quite pleasant. Well, let's look at the Y. So the Y has a little bit more artifacts, but still very minimal, as you guys can see. So yeah, quite impressive. So this is the Y wall and the X wall. Bottom looks really nice, straight to the bed, and the top also looks good. So yeah, quite impressive. So I went ahead and printed a benchy, and right away I can see that it's way too stringy, so I need to up the retraction a bit. Now let's go ahead and pull them off here. So it's stuck to the bed very well. At the same time, pops off pretty good. So it seems like whatever this build material is, it works well. And so this is the benchy. Now the benchy looks really good overall, kind of like the cube, but I do notice a little bit more layering. It's kind of hard to see because it's fine, but overall it looks quite solid. But there are a couple layers that shifted. They're very fine though, so not anything major. So the bottom here, we can kind of see that we need to probably get a little closer to the bed. And the way we can do that is in the slicer. Right now the offset is 0.2, and I can just lower that to 0.15 or maybe even 0.1. So, and also I need to bump up the retraction from 4.5 to maybe 6.5, or even a little more than that. So ignoring all the stringing, if we look right here on the back at that little box on the boat, you can see there's a little slit there. So usually that slit indicates good precision. But we're going to try that out with a bearing print that I usually do, and we'll see if it spins up. But yeah, overall the walls are sitting very nice, and the cooling seems to be good too. So really nothing to complain about on this model. So overall, very solid and good benchy. So yeah, starting out here, it looks like we're doing really good, and the printer's printing and there's no issues whatsoever. So I'm going to go ahead and print a bunch of other models, and we'll take a closer look at that. Alright, and this is everything that I printed on this little printer. So as far as the whole experience, it's pretty smooth, and you know, because I did use the SD card, I did have to go to the computer every time and change the file to 0, the one I wanted to print. So that was kind of a little bit of a nuisance, but that could all go away if you just connect it straight to the computer. But other than that, it printed every time and just seemed to work. And surprisingly, the Z-axis off switch mechanism works pretty well. Now I did notice that it's not completely consistent every time, and I think it's because the more it punches in one place, the deeper it gets into the build surface, which makes it go lower and lower. So because this is a square, you could just rotate it around. But as far as long term is concerned, that might become an issue after a bit. So let's go ahead and look at the rest of these prints that we printed, starting with this little frog. And I really like printing this guy because quite small, pretty detailed, and has a pretty good test of how well a printer can print with smooth surfaces and complicated shapes. And overall, this thing did really good. There is a little bit of stringing, and I ended up settling at around 7.5 millimeter retraction, which eventually ended up being just right. But yeah, if we look at the layers and how they're sitting, everything is actually pretty good. And you can tell in the reflections how well it's all combined together. Now we do have some hangovers here. that are severe, and we got some droopage under his arms, but that's a pretty common problem. It's really steep there. But overall, I think it did pretty well. So the other thing I'm pretty excited to show you guys is this bearing, and this is a great test for any printer that can determine, you know, if it's accurate enough or not, because the tolerances in these bearings are quite small. So in order for all this to spin, it has to be printed right, and this printer did a great job because it spins right up. If anything, it might be a little on the looser side. So this bearing also showed that the printer is under extruding just a tiny bit, and you can kind of see it here on the top. It's a little bit under extruded, and this is probably why the gear is a little bit looser than usual, but most of the time it's too tight. But still cool to see that, you know, it printed a functional part and it works, so that's nice. So I also like printing this bolt because it kind of just shows, you know, an overall layering and plus the overhangs here underneath these threads. So the bolt turned out really nice. Really nothing to complain about here. All the layers are sitting quite good. The only issue that there was a bit on the very top, maybe you guys can see, but there's some separation there. It looks like under extrusion or something happened all the way at the top. Now this is the maximum height that this printer can print, which is 100 millimeters, and I think the bolt's at 99.5 or something, so it's right there at the maximum height. And the great part was that this bolt came off the bed very easily, just peeled right off since the bed is flexible. So here we still have my two favorite prints, which is the astronaut and the spaceship. And the astronaut turned out pretty good, but he's not perfect. I don't know if you guys can tell or not, but there is a little bit of some kind of vibration or maybe under extrusion or something. I can't tell exactly, but that's only when you're looking at him super close. Overall, it actually looks quite nice. One of the things to note here is that the surface area that it takes to hold this is very small, and surprisingly the bed had no issues with any of the prints I did, so the flexible magnetic build platform seems to work great. And now for the spaceship, it didn't go completely great on this, or at least as we got to the top. Now this is tiny. Obviously you can see in my hand, I usually things spread out pretty big, but this is the maximum of 100 millimeters here. So, and it is in spiralized mode, so that means one layer all the way around to the very top, and there's about 5 layers on the very bottom as the base. So the bottom grabbed good, no problems there. We can see the walls here, the reflections, so not too bad everywhere around here. This is very nice and uniform. But as we start going up into this area, we start to have some kind of under extrusion. So I'm not sure exactly what happened there, but for some reason it was having an issue pushing out the filament. And as it went up, it continued to have that issue. And then this little part here is really hard to print because it's tiny. So I'm even surprised that it got this far. So a little hard to tell on the details because of the under extrusion. Judging it by down here, it looks pretty nice. So this was spiralized mode, and that's what came out. Now the last print I printed, and I wanted to show you guys the volume of the print, was this little box here, or I guess a huge box for this printer, and it's 95 by 95 thickness and almost 100 high. And so what's quite impressive is the bottom just peeled right off, no issues. And if we look at all of our corners, they look really nice. Can't say the same thing for the walls because the walls had some funky stuff going on. So this was the back wall. I'm not sure what happened there. And this is the left wall, doesn't look too bad. This is the front, also there's something funky going on here. And the right wall, also not too bad. So it appeared that the X had the most issue and the Y had the least issues, which is kind of interesting, but I guess for this printer, and because this is its maximum capacity here, there might have been some components overstretching or something, causing this interesting patterns in the print. But as far as the print goes, it printed well and it's strong. You guys can see it flexes somewhat. I'm sure if I push it harder, I'll break it, but overall a pretty durable, nice print, and definitely a usable box. So overall I would say a successful print. So as far as print quality, I think this printer is okay. Now there might be some things that need to be adjusted or looked at to tune it. So I didn't do any of that. I just wanted to operate it right out of the box so you guys can see what this is what we get. And overall I'm quite pleased with how the prints came out, and you could really tell with the calibration cube. But with that said, the printer overall is great and very minimalistic. You guys see how small the form factor of this thing is. You know, this is its main strength, is that it's small and it could fit anywhere. And another strength, at least in my opinion, is the overall look of this thing. It looks quite premium because it's all metal. And even though we don't have a heated bed, which doesn't really appear that we need one with the build surface that we have, everything sticks well. And also the removable magnetic mat is great for pulling off the larger prints with no issues whatsoever. So who is this printer for? Well, I think this printer is for someone that is just curious about 3D printing, or maybe just getting started and wants something simple, small, and quite unique. Now, if you're more of a seasoned user and you've been around 3D printers for a while, this probably is not for you because it's not going to really impress you too much. The build volume is quite small, and so that limits it quite a bit, you know, not having much adjustability on anything. But with that said, if you wanted to make a gift, I think this would be a great printer for that because it's quite easy to set up and it's quite exciting. It looks great, and if you know someone that could enjoy this, this would be a great present. All right, guys, well, hopefully you enjoyed this video of the MakerPi M1. It is a pretty interesting printer, and I enjoyed reviewing it. And if you enjoyed it also, then hit that like button. So if you want to pick one up, I'm going to have some links in the description. Check that out. And if you enjoy videos like this, I got more 3D printing stuff coming up, so stay tuned for that. And if you're interested in any other types of printers, I got quite a few videos in the playlist, so check that out. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.